You are listening to the Icehouse podcast, hosting conversations with gritty Kiwi business owners and leaders and industry-leading minds.
Kia ora everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Icehouse podcast. I am Bryar, the community manager, and really awesome to be having incredible conversations with our alumni, our business owners and leaders that are just doing great things in the community and just doing really good business. And this story is no different. I am talking today with Trina Jones. She is an owner manager program 60 alumni, so has recently finished the program. She's also the co-founder of Cultivate, a recruitment company helping people grow and thrive by connecting potential and opportunity. Thank you so much, Trina, for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate your time and being here.
No worries. Well, I like to start with a very open question. Everyone tends to answer it a little bit different. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you passionate about?
Well, look, I am originally a West Aucklander, so I am pretty proud of West Auckland. These days I live a bit more centrally, but I still consider Central West still a nod to West Auckland. But in terms of what I'm passionate about, look, I love to travel. I think anyone who knows me knows that is a very core part of what I think about. You know, where am I going to next? What countries can I add to the list? All of that good stuff. So for me, that's a key part of, it's almost like a hobby, I guess, from that perspective. But from a work perspective, look, I love seeing people succeed. So that to me is just makes is what dreams are made of when you think about, you know, how happy you could be in the workplace and what brings the best out of people. So that success piece through others is awesome.
Fantastic. I love that. Can I ask, where was the last place you traveled to out of interest?
I just went to the Caribbean and Mexico. So
it
was super cool. Definitely a different temperature to pretty old New Zealand. Definitely less rain, but yes, lots of fun.
Oh, good on you. That's so cool. Love to hear someone that's really passionate about travel. To give listeners understanding or context to what your life looks like, what does a day in the life of Trina look like?
Yes, well, it does start pretty early. I am an early bird. So I tend to get up 5-ish, out walking, 5:30 with hubby in terms of kickstarting the day.
Awesome.
Can't really not have a coffee, as you know, those caffeine addicts out there. Yep, I'm one of those. And tend to be in the office by 7:30. For me, that gives me a lot of prep time to sort of focus on what I need to get done in the day. And then look, the day itself is, you know, the life of recruitment. No 2 days are the same. So there's a whole host of things going on, from problem solving to managing, meeting, catching up with people, getting out and seeing our customers, focusing on our strategy and how we can move some key projects along. But very much having that sort of face time with the team as well, because we're hybrid, so we tend to be in the office a couple of days a week, or in some instances I'll be in a bit more. So it can be a lot of everything, but just how I like it. It keeps us, you know, busy and on our toes.
Totally, keeps it interesting. And yes, recruitment, I can imagine, would be changing every single day.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think most people will say no 2 days are the same, and that's because you can plan to the best of your ability, but you've got to react to what comes down or comes at you in terms of company requirements or things that happen on the day. And we're in the people-orientated business, so things change pretty quickly. So it's important that you can respond to that whilst also have some good planning in place as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You said right at the start, you know, what you're passionate about. You love seeing people succeed. Do you think that links to your sense of purpose? You know, what is your deep sense of purpose in what you do, and how did you discover that purpose?
Yeah, look, I think I'm a big goal setter. So I think for me, I like to have lofty goals. I like to have short-term goals, but I think a part of that is thinking about what are the building blocks that allow you to get there. And I think you see that through people as well. So if you've got a new starter and you're thinking about the journey that they need to go on, you're thinking about those, you know, what's the end game, what's the end goal, but what do you do to make sure that you can focus on the building blocks to help get them there? And then when you start to see those moments, aha moments, little wins, big wins, it's what makes you smile, what makes you, it's seeing people start to really build confidence in what they're doing. And I guess my deep sense of purpose is built around achieving those goals. So however small or big they are, you've got to sort of celebrate the wins along the way and have fun. But you've got to have a goal in mind, whatever. So personally, yes, it might be I want to tick off as many countries in this world, but it's kind of the how do you do that? Same notion when you think about business, and also seeing people succeed. But I'm a big believer in saying yes to things. Find a way to say yes. And I think when you asked about how did I discover that, I think many moons ago, or maybe in my early 20s, a wee while ago, I lost a few people in my life at that time. And I think as a result of that, it just made me, you realise just how short life is. I think, if you focus on yes, or how do you get to yes, or can versus cannot, I think that's certainly a big part of what drives me.
Oh, what an answer. It's amazing when something happens right in our personal world that can shake up that realization that the time we have on this earth is so short. What impact are we going to have?
Exactly. And so don't sweat the small stuff. I know people hear me say that often, I mean this nicely, but is anyone going to die? No, then it's not that bad. So I think that's sort of a mantra I just try to take with me, because sometimes, not every day is a great day, but if you focus on what you can do, what's within your control, we often also say, pity city is just somewhere you go to visit, not somewhere you wallow. So I think
brilliant.
Just trying to sort of reflect and make sure that doesn't dominate or impact, your day or your week or others, I think is really important.
Totally. And having a manager myself that has used that same line, well, no one's going to die from this, so it's not the end of the world, And actually on the other side of that leadership, it gives freedom to sort of give things a go, to try things, to make mistakes, to fail fast, to move on, to not hold things too heavy. There's so much power in that, just speaking from someone being on the other side of that leadership. So love to hear that.
100%. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. It might sound a little bit morbid to say, but it strikes a chord with people,
Absolutely. Yeah. So going back to that, young, in early 20s, how has your career journey looked from that point onwards?
Yeah, interestingly, I fell into recruitment. I think if you ask most recruiters, that's typically what that's how their career is kicked off. So I fell into recruitment. You go in for a role, they suggest that you'd be good for recruitment. So I worked with a couple of boutiques initially. That was fun, but I decided that I really wanted to get some experience in a big corporate. So made that move. Spent a long time there, so 19 years. So I learned a lot through, eternity. I sound very, don't know. So 19 years at a big multinational, again, super fun, lots of experience, lots of exposure. And probably 11 of those years, I got into leading teams. So again, leadership wasn't something that I necessarily had my eye on. Again, fell into it. I realised how much I loved it. And I think as we got to the tail end of that 19 years, clearly COVID hit. And I think COVID for many people was a time of reflection. What do you want to do next? And I think that, basically manifested into an opportunity for us to get Cultivate underway. So I think for us getting the business underway, mid-COVID, some people might have thought, what were we thinking? It just felt right. It felt that we had all of these amazing people and we could do it. We could step off that corporate juggernaut and actually work together and deliver some great outcomes or talent outcomes for customers. So, set up the business a couple of years ago. So my first time being a business owner. Lots to learn. But it's been an incredible journey. And I think we are very blessed that we had a number of people who believed in what we were trying to achieve and setting the business up, and sort of jumped on that bandwagon with us. So my career has very much been very recruitment centric.
Yeah, absolutely. And cool to, hear that journey of falling into the industry and then falling in love with the industry, I'm sure, and enough to sort of have your own business of yourself. I'm sure there's been a whole lot of learnings going from that big corporate model to actually running and co-founding the business yourself. Is there a piece of advice you'd give yourself looking back, to maybe pre-starting that business?
Good question. I think I would probably try and tell myself to worry less. Whether that could be applied or not would be interesting. But I think when you've got people's livelihood in your hands, you're setting up a business, you're very conscious of looking after these individuals. I worry about that probably incessantly.
Wow.
Because of the sacrifice people made, we were COVID, anything, could have happened or eventuated in the market, many of which could have been out of our control. But if I could tell myself to worry less, I might have had a bit more time to focus on other things instead of, worrying myself silly.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, you're so right. It's such a transition though from the corporate world where things are fairly secure, in terms of not having to worry about where your colleagues' paycheck is coming from that week. But then going into that whole nother world of actually owning and running a business. So you're a co-founder. Are there other founders alongside you? How did that team develop?
Yeah, so I've got two other business partners, and between the three of us, we'd actually also come out of the same agency, having worked together in leadership roles for a number of years. So the beauty behind that is we had that opportunity to work very much together as a team, and that has allowed us to play to our strengths and realise where we shine and where there's passion and interest and where we complement each other, which I think has been super cool as part of that.
Yeah, brilliant. Can you give listeners just an overview to what Cultivate focuses on, what you guys specialize in recruitment?
Sure. So essentially we set the business up. We provide a range of talent solutions, a focus being on recruitment, clearly the end-to-end process, but we also are very clear that sometimes we've got customers who would like our help with parts of the service. We don't need to absolutely do everything. There's some work we do that might be consulting led, so sitting alongside the customer to help them with the hiring process itself. As I say, parts of the process or the full end to end, and that's really across delivering contract and permanent solutions. And we deliver predominantly sort of in that office orientated space. So your accounting, supply chain, logistics, business support, customer services, HR, and marketing. And we work right across New Zealand. The beauty of technology being an enabler has allowed us to really very much recruit right across the country. So we do that currently as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's cool to hear. You say, with your co-founders, you kind of know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so you know what you bring to the company. What would you say fulfills you most as the co-founder in the business?
Yeah, for me, it's being in the driver's seat or alongside a couple of others in the driver's seat. The reason I say that is I guess you get institutionalized coming out of a big corporate. You're used to, whilst you have some control over how you execute strategy, you're not in charge of strategy. And there is a directive that sits above you. So I think for me, being in the driver's seat, making the decisions that are most relevant and important to our business, trying and changing things, and focusing on the stuff that really matters. And, to make sure that you're focused on the right things and, try something. If it doesn't work, you know not to do it again. If it does, great, you keep going. So I think being agile has been hugely rewarding. I think you realise sort of, I guess, when the shackles come off from corporate and you realise that you're that you're really in charge and focused on the right things that are meaningful decisions you can make. And it really is your baby, And I think for me, also seeing us make our mark in the industry as a newer player, because look, recruitment can be heavily saturated at big times. But I guess for us to have made our mark has been, a rewarding part of that experience, because you don't need to sort of necessarily conform. You can kind of step out and go, right, we're going to try something a bit different, or we're going to hear our customers as to what's important to them, and we'll give that a go. We'll look at the best decisions that can ensure that we are focused on the right outcomes.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. How has actually, first of all, I'd be quite keen to know how the team growth has happened. So started with the 3 co-founders. Who was the first hire?
Well, interestingly, you say that. We actually started with 14.
Oh, wow. Oh, yes. Please tell me more about that story then. I'm glad I asked it.
So we kick-started with 14. So I think it sort of harks back to people who've made the sacrifice, who we worked with our prior agency, who took that leap of faith and said, we believe in what you guys stand for. We'd love to come with you. Essentially, so 14 very known individuals to us, which is incredibly helpful to kickstart a business. But again, I guess it's never lost on me that we have had people, certainly our foundation, or OGs as we often call them, that believed in us, and essentially we had a very fast start from a people lens, and we're now sitting at 20 people. Wow. So we've grown in about 2.5 years' time.
Wow, I've never heard that before, starting with that 14. That is actually such a cool perspective, but a huge learning curve and jump for you, jumping into that and leading a team of that size from day dot. That's quite an interesting story you've got there.
It is a very fast start, which people often tell me, and I think our customers, when they're interested in our journey and how we've grown and our headcount size, they're often quite blown away. But we had a very accelerated start, which allowed us to sort of grow and come out of ramping up quite quickly, but also very experienced and knowledgeable people in the market. Sure. Which in our industry is absolutely critically important, reputationally, but also because people operate and specialise in where they recruit, and it's a very big trust exercise in terms of candidates and customers.
Yeah, and like you said, you didn't just start with a group of people you didn't know, you knew them. Wow. So yeah, that totally makes sense. As you've mentioned with the industry and how important, relationship is and trust, are there any other sort of changes or things that have evolved in the industry since you started all those years ago, 20 or so years ago?
Yeah. So interestingly, a huge amount has changed. So whether we look at it from a recruitment agency lens, it was very manual, very paper-based. You fast forward to where we're at now, we have a huge investment in recruitment technology, tools, plugins, the way in which we can communicate, social media, there's a whole host of the technology tools, as well as we used to advertise in print, and now everything is online.
True.
So there's been a huge a step in the right direction in terms of accessibility, the way in which people can apply, the way in which we can interview candidates as well remotely. So technology has played a wonderful role in accelerating the industry, and I think some of the other parts that have also played a key role is certainly the flexible working practices.
Huge.
Hybrid, and that has been accelerated through COVID, which is, I think, for most people, that's probably the big blessing that COVID has given us in terms of a gift, if you want to call it a gift, has been the ability to accelerate that, the investment in technology that's allowed that for candidates who are, job seekers and looking for a bit of work-life balance and flexible working practices. So that's been hugely accelerated. We see a lot of well-being. Obviously, we've got the cost of living crisis that we're seeing, right across New Zealand. Really, that's impacting, beyond New Zealand, to be fair, as well. And as a result of that, you've got a greater demand on salaries. So there's been a lot of work done in terms of lifting, the minimum wage, the living wage, and we're huge fans of making sure that we can advocate or make sure that people are paid minimum living wage. So all of our any of our temps and contractors, that is absolutely the minimum. We wouldn't go below that. So we think about what is our role in that equation to make sure that we can support that, even if it's advocacy work around making sure candidates are paid at the most appropriate market rate, or what role do we play as an agency as well.
Great.
But the other piece is really around encouraging sort of an inclusive and safe recruitment process. So we know that there's lots of DE&I strategies out there in market. It's really important to think about that process and how it can work well to make sure it's psychologically safe for candidates and a good outcome for customers as well.
Absolutely. It's so people-based from what you're saying.
100%. So look after people, they'll look after you. If you value them, they'll value what they do, high productivity. It's not just about feeling like you're pandering to, our candidate demands. It's about sort of getting the best out of people. Yeah. And if you look after them and they're less worried about, survival in terms of income, and, they're more prosperous in their outlook, they've got good balance with family life, it means that they can bring the best version of themselves to their workplace.
Totally. Yeah, what an interesting time that you stepped into. I know you've been in the industry for a long time, but to step into having something of your own, there was so much uncertainty around the recruitment, like there was loss of jobs, and then it was like this massive boom in terms of salary, but just a lot of jobs going, a lot of people struggling to hire. Lots of different dynamics that I know I've heard even across this podcast that business owners have been dealing with over the last couple of years. So a really interesting time to sort of jump into the mix and bring value through what you guys do. Yeah, it's interesting.
100%. Yeah, it's a game of two halves, right? Last year it was all talent shortages. You couldn't get people. Vacancies were staying open for significant amounts of time. Borders are now open. Immigration settings have played out. People are back and able to sort of, make their way. So migration has had a positive impact. And the market has shifted this year. So I think, we're certainly hearing customers feeling that the market is in a better place to access talent. But there's still an art to how you keep them.
Yes. Yeah. Is it something you spend time talking to the people that are trying to recruit about? Like, hey, all good once you recruit these people, but here's some tips on how to retain.
100%. We want to make sure that our role doesn't just end at, delivering a shortlist or having a great placement outcome. We want to make sure that things are considered or thought about, because it's one thing to get somebody to accept a role and sign on the dotted line, but we know it's a competitive market. There may be other offers at play. So the experience that we feel right through that process, including after they signed, their onboarding, to how engaged they feel through the first few months, the training, how well they're supported and looked after through that. There's plenty of research that will tell you the more engaged people are, the longer you're going to retain them. They feel that a good sense of belonging, a sense of purpose and engagement. They know why they're there. They're bought into the culture. They feel looked after. It's a bit of an exercise to recruit someone. No hiring manager would want to see that person disappear midway through training. So I guess our work around advocacy is really just to help whether you're a new manager recruiting for the first time, or whether we need to give you some feedback on whether market rates are sitting for that particular role, or it may be that we're looking at wanting to expedite the process to make sure that we're moving quickly, or at a pace where we're not going to lose candidates either. So we tend to I guess our approach is to be consultative, because we want to make sure we're adding value through the process, but we want to make sure that if they've got their eye on wanting someone, that that whole experience results in them securing that person, but the job doesn't end there. Then it's around, what do you do next to make sure that person is absolutely locked and loaded and is feeling great about the decision that they made. So I guess for us, it's making sure we can help through that, provide insights. We talk to customers around why that's important. And I think for us, notwithstanding that, we do the same with candidates as well, in terms of making sure they're well prepared, their best foot forward, and they are seen in the light that we've seen them in, so they have the opportunity to sort of move that process forward as well.
Oh, that's such great practical advice. Just that snippet there of what you've said is very valuable to the everyday business owner, because it can seem like such a mammoth task to hire someone. It's a huge element of business, but also it does affect the people that are still in the business, right? Because if there's a hole or a gap for longer than a month or two, you're obviously having to pick up that work. And so, there's so many different dynamics of why it's so important to have a smooth process when recruiting and really getting into it.
100%. A misfire can be really costly.
Yes.
It can be, it can affect your team culture. That old saying, one bad egg.
Yeah.
One bad egg is enough. And it can really dilute all of your great work with the rest of the team, because people can get quite frustrated if you've got a high-performing team. They struggle with it. So it's really important you take the time up front to make sure that you run a really robust process to make sure you have the best outcome, not just because a misfire is a costly exercise, but because your team rely on it as well. Your productivity relies on it, your ability to make sure that you're addressing a shortfall if you do indeed have a team who are overworked and this resource is being brought in to help alleviate that. So you take the time up front, run a quality process, because it's not easy to be dealing with a misfire at the other end.
Absolutely. Yeah, really good advice. Changing gears a bit, but I would love to hear how you first heard of the Icehouse.
Yes, well, interestingly, my accountant.
Cool. Awesome.
Program. I'm just trying to, I can't remember which OMP she did, but I'm pretty sure it was a good few years ago now. So she had talked to me about it probably in the first year. She said, you should start thinking about it, have a little nosy. I did. I thought, God, how am I going to fit this in? Second year rolled around. I thought, oh, okay, I really should do it. But I also felt quite torn with the business as well, in terms of my time needed to be, working on the business, in the business. So no, she was very, very deliberate in a nice way of just, keeping me honest around it. And so, look, I was incredibly grateful. And it was actually nice to know someone else who'd gone through it.
Yes.
She was very honest with me that it might be a little bit lighter on the old female front. But in that look, and I guess if there are any women listening out there, I would absolutely say that whilst that was the case for me, we had a couple of females, it didn't absolutely in no way impacted my ability to enjoy the program. And if anything, I would encourage more women to do it.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you for saying that, because when we get asked, how many women do we have on programs, our answer is not enough, because we would, absolutely love to have more incredible owner managers that are women on our programs. But it's not always the case. That's the reality. And it is work on our end, I guess, to sort of break down what the expectations are in the room, who's going to be in the room, having other people in there that, look like them, that have been through other things in life like them. So absolutely agree. Thank you for saying that.
And I just, in no way did it hamper my learning experience. I think it's, I was, a little bit apprehensive at the start, but that couldn't have been further from my experience. And as you've touched on, it is absolutely a great program for women, and a great program when you've got such a diverse range of sectors, companies, owners, family structures, co-founders in the room. It just allows you to have a great networking opportunity and friendships, which has been really cool.
Yes, that's so good to hear. in the role as community manager, for me, I just love seeing that community come to life, and sitting in one of the sessions in your guys' block, probably around middle of it. It's so cool to see you guys forming those friendships and connections, because it's such a big part of the Icehouse is actually the cohort and doing life together post the program. Have you found that sense of community yourself within the cohort?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a trip coming up to already together.
Yes.
Stay
Is
apart.
that to Glenham?
Yes, our
Yeah.
trip. So I'm definitely heading down for that. But I think even our dinner recently, we were talking about maybe we should do it twice a year as opposed to once a year. So
Wow.
look, we just have a whole lot of fun together. I think because you've got, and we talk about it broadly, the whole Chatham House rules and what you share and confide in each other. It's comforting and helpful to sort of re-engage in those conversations and know that it's based on trust, and that you have that community, as you say, where you can sort of share where things are going. You can be honest, and I think also you can have fun, and you can ask each other questions on things that you're working on that you're not entirely sure about, and it's their specialty, or it's their line of business. So it's hugely helpful, and it's a wonderful sort of cohort to be a part of.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. From a personal perspective, did you have any takeaways from it? There's obviously a lot about resilience and that sort of thing. Was there anything personally you took away?
Look, there were a couple of probably, there's a whole host of things that I took away. But I think for me, a couple of the key things was know your numbers. I know we got that in probably might have been the second workshop that we did, but for all the right reasons. Yes, you can rely on an accountant, but you need to be across your numbers. You need to make sure you understand what the levers are. And having insight and understanding is really important as well. And that's not just at a high level. It's just sort of making sure that you have a good understanding. You can lift up the lid and be really clear on that front. But a key piece was, if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after others. So that piece came through just in terms of I think I'm a pretty resilient person, but again, to become resilient, or to have, to withstand things when they don't go your way, you need to make sure that you look after number one, to make sure you're best positioned to look after others. And then the last piece, I think, that we did pretty much when I came out of the last session, was making sure you keep zooming out. So you've got to make sure that you take a step back, you zoom out, and you consider what the opportunities or threats or issues might be coming down. I mean, you see AI and technology, rate at which it's moving is incredibly scary, but you've got to keep your eye on it. What does that mean as an opportunity, but also what could it mean as a threat? So I think it's in any business, I would say that would be relevant, as opposed to sort of, not sticking your head under and hoping that it'll all be right. It's important, because then you can be a lot more deliberate in how you tackle it, or what you keep an eye on, and what you do differently as a result. I think that zooming out and making sure you're doing that analysis work, it just allows you to make sure you keep an eye on what could impact your business, when, why, how, and what do you do in terms of planning.
Oh, absolute gold. Thank you for sharing that. That's cool. And love as well the idea of, if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after others, which is a huge part of being an owner manager within a business, right? So brilliant. Would love to hear, do you have any personal and professional goals that you're currently working towards? That's always quite inspiring for people.
Yes, well, personally, I mean, I think most of my team would laugh, but I would love to, because Bali's my second home, which
cool. Yeah,
I go there every year. But if I could spend more time away and working, I would love that. I do a bit of it currently, but of course that's a little bit more of an end game at some point. But again, I think there's the ability to think about what's important to people. I mean, I've got one of my ladies who works between Australia and here. I've got someone else who works from Matakana. So it's just thinking a bit differently around traditional work settings, and I'm a fan of that from a personal perspective. And then professionally, the DE&I area is a passion project for myself and for my business partners. So for those who might be listening, thinking, what is DE&I? It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I guess for us, it's a core part of our strategy. And it's a key focus for us as we continue to grow and evolve. And I guess the reason why is, we know that the millennials and the Gen Zs are coming through, and that's really important to them, but also having diversity of thought, having diversity of perspective is good for business.
Yes.
So, it's not just, well, it looks good and we should do it. It is actually beneficial for business, and there's plenty of research around town that can tell you that for anyone thinking, how much of a difference can it really make? So, we're on a big journey in that regard. And I think for us, that's a huge focus for us in terms of what we do in that space.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. I love the idea that diversity can be diversity of thinking and thought. And actually, from the Icehouse has another podcast called A Seat at the Table, and it's around DEI. Yes, that's right. And it's around diversity, right? And what I've so learned from it is the diversity in experience, ethnicity, and gender actually equals diversity in thought, because you've all had different experiences that you can then bring to the table.
100%. And we all, there's 8 billion brains on the planet, right? Like no two brains think the same way. So if you think about that in the context of leadership teams, teams themselves, if you think about the customers we work with, they're all different. So having that diversity of thought and perspectives and thinking, and also, it can command respect. If you're conscious of who you sit around the table with, you'll think a bit differently about what they, the position that they're coming from. And everyone's got a different viewpoint, and that's healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not being combative. It means that you've just got to consider how you sort of bring that thinking to the table, but looking at all those viewpoints.
No, I love that. Cool to hear that it's a big part of your guys' strategy as well. I would love to finish on this question, and thank you so much, Trina, for this amazing conversation. I have personally learned a lot and got a lot from it. What's the future of Cultivate look like?
Oh, the future. If I was to gaze into the future, look, I think obviously we'd love to be bigger. But, again, we've always had a view that we want to grow in the right way with the very best people. So we would be quite happy to stay the same size if it means that, we look after what we have. But if we can grow with that philosophy of, we want to complement what we do, we want to perhaps look at some other specializations, again, that complement what we do and make sense, and where we can work with customers in a greater capacity as opposed to just sort of in one area, if that makes from that perspective. So look, bigger isn't always better, but and that's actually something I took out from Icehouse. Sometimes you can be bigger, but actually that's a lot more painful. So again, so concerted growth in the right way, maybe looking at a couple of specializations that we might have our eye on in the future. But also, and I've touched on it, we want to continue our work in that DE&I space, and we would love to be known as being thought leaders in that space, and really starting in a nice way, agitating the market to make sure we're really thinking about, for some businesses, DE&I is very much a fabric of what they do, but for others, how can we sort of start to try and impart our knowledge and so far around making that process a lot more inclusive, because if it's inclusive for all.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great to hear. Sounds a really exciting future ahead and very intentional. I think that's very important. Like you said, growth for growth's sake is not a great strategy if we're not growing with great people and with intention in mind. And so that's a really great reminder for those listening too. And very cool to hear about how diversity inclusion is is a huge part of where you guys are heading and the value that you bring as part of the business. So very, very cool. Thank you so much for sharing so many nuggets of gold. I personally am walking away having learnt a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners are feeling the same. So thanks so much for your time today and for being on the Icehouse podcast, Trina.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me.